Well, hello friends. Welcome to the SerenityOS update for February 2023. Before we start, I just want to say a big congratulations to Jelle and his family because they just had a baby. And that's why Jelle is not here today. And we are all very, very happy for him. So congrats to Jelle. Now, February has been a lovely month in the Serenity project, very productive. We saw about 1,300 commits from, I think, 80 individual developers. So lots of interesting new things to look at and talk about. And we are going to do that right now. So let's go and look at some stuff. So here we are on the February edition of the SerenityOS desktop. And I got my cool Yak wallpaper. And first thing I want to show you is in the text editor. So if we set it to JavaScript syntax and I'll write a while loop like this, you'll notice that there's a little thing in the margin here which allows me to collapse and expand this scope like this. And this, we're calling this code folding, and it was implemented by Sam, who also had to do a bunch of other stuff in the text editing systems to support this feature and make it possible. So big thanks to Sam for improving editing. And while we're in the text editor, by the way, you'll also see these recently open files. This is a feature I implemented earlier this month in a video. If you want to see how the implementation went. And basically it just remembers the 4 most recently open files in this program. And then you can click on them if you want to open them up like this. Pretty nifty. Okay, so some other random stuff, by the way. I've talked about color profiles, and I'm still not exactly sure how to make use of color profiles, but Nico keeps working on our color profile support and just parsing the ICC file format. And he's been going ham on that. And if I use the ICC test tool, I can dump out this Japan web-coded ICC color profile. And I know that, like, last month, we were not dumping nearly as much as we're dumping out now, I think. But he also added some feature that allows you to serialize a color profile. So in order to, I guess, verify that we've really understood the profile, we can actually re-encode it. Hello. And that gives us a sort of reconstruction of the color profile. So we read it in and write it out again. So not only do we have a color profile parser, we now have a writer as well. And I know Nico has also been adding support for like extracting the color profile from more image formats. And I'm just standing by, waiting to learn how this all fits together, which is going to be interesting. So, but big props to Nico for tackling something as big as color profile support. That is very awesome. Speaking of Nico, I know that he also started building a WebP image decoder this month. And it's just baby steps and scaffolding so far, but it's something that will be very cool to have because the WebP image format is, gaining some popularity online. So it'd be great to be able to decode it. And speaking of image formats, I know that this month Lucas picked up work on our JPEG decoder as well. And I don't have any great demos of either of these things, but it is really nice to see people just improving our image decoding support, because one of the most annoying things when you browse websites in Serenity is if everything is fine, but the images don't load, then that feels silly. So we should be getting better and better at actually loading images from the web and displaying them. Anyway, so something else I want to show you is in Pixel Paint. So I know that, let's make a new layer actually. And I know that Tim Ledbetter has been doing a bunch of different things. For example, this move tool now it has these resize handles, and I think you could resize before, but it didn't have these comfy handles here. And wait a second. I'm clicking on the resize handle of the red layer, but it's starting to resize the background layer instead. That doesn't seem right. It seems like it's only reacting if the mouse event is inside of the layer, even though the handle makes it look like I can grab it anywhere. Anyways, so there are some minor issues, but I think this is really awesome still, and it's going to be even awesomer when it works as you expect. So big thanks to Tim for working on Pixel Paint. And I know he did a bunch of other things as well, like working on the masks and making it so that mask changes are part of the undo stack. And I don't even know how to demo that because I don't really understand how to work with masks yet. I need to learn that better. Anyway, another thing that's kind of new this month is, well, we already had the chess game, but we've had some refinements. So Sam was doing some stuff. For example, the pieces are no longer taking up the entire square. Instead, I think we draw like the pieces at 80% of the square size, so it doesn't look quite as stretched and weird. And the pieces are also drawn with bilinear filtering, so they're not jagged and awkward looking. And chess settings is new this month as well. So Sam added this, it's part of the game settings, which also has the card game settings, but chess has its own section here where you can switch out to a different piece set if you want, and if you prefer different board colors, if you want coordinates or not. So thank you, Sam, for adding chess settings. I think it is very sweet to just see. I remember when we didn't have many settings, and then I figured, let's just make a home for the settings, and then people will probably add more settings, and they do. And if you look here, you'll see it really started to accumulate a bunch of them. And it reminds me a little bit of the way settings work on iOS, which I remember initially thinking it was weird that you would have settings for all apps in the same place, but there's something kind of logical about it. Anyway, so something totally different is a new feature in Hack Studio. So this was Itamar I think he saw John Carmack talking about how it would be so cool if you could just attach a debugger to a running program in a GUI and sort of start exploring based on where the debugger happens to stop. And Itamar was inspired by this and went and implemented that for SerenityOS. So if let's make a file manager thing here, and we will right click here and click debug in Hack Studio. Then it will open up and even has a progress bar for attaching the debugger in the bottom there. And you'll see that it stops and we are paused right here. So the file manager that I just attached to is currently waiting for events in the event loop. And we can actually explore the process here, although I'm not seeing any variables in the stack frame. So it still needs a little bit of work, this feature, but I think this is a really, really cool piece of vertical integration. Like the fact that you can just look in the system monitor here, see the running processes, and just decide that, oh, I just want to attach a debugger to whatever, and you can just bounce right into it. I think this is going to be really, really sweet once we get it working really well. It just gives the system that extreme introspectability, I guess, if you can just attach to anything at any time. So big props to Itamar for building that also. Now it seems like this thing is a little bit dead. And how do I get rid of that? Do I have a debugger running? I don't have xkill. File manager. No? No, this is an interesting issue. I haven't had to deal with this in forever. So what we would want to do is get rid of this thing, right? Kill process. Oh, I guess I should have just kill -9 did. All right. So yeah, big props to Itamar for working on Hack Studio debugger integration and making it accessible from system monitors. So cool. And I'm really excited to see what happens when we polish that feature and make it better. All right, so then let's take a look at Hex Editor, because I know there was some new stuff there. And let's get a file like the shell, and then we'll just hex edit it. So I think this month, the new thing in Hex Editor is the value inspector. So if I select some stuff here, and then I can open the value inspector, then it shows me like different interpretations of the data. And I think we already had the value inspector, but new this month is string interpretation. So I guess it can interpret strings in different ways. So like if you have ASCII literals, UTF-8 literals, or UTF-16 literals, it will display those sort of correctly. And like ASCII literals are not super interesting because you can just read them here. But for something like UTF-16, if that's embedded in your file, it would be valuable to have a way to inspect them like this. And I know that there was a bunch of people who worked on that PR. Like somebody worked on it, and then somebody else took over, and there was this game of almost like a relay race. And I think Guillaume and Andreas originally worked on it, and then Edward was the person who finally brought the feature in and finished it up. So thank you everybody for working on that. It is it does get a little weird when you have new lines, it seems like, but it's really neat. And I think there are many more cool features we could do in Hex Editor, especially something like C-struct. Like if you can declare a C style struct, and then it will tell you what each value is. Something like that could be really cool. But that is not what we're here to do right now. Now we're just going to look at stuff. So in File Manager, by the way, I know that Tim Ledbetter built this thing where if you open the properties for a directory like root here, then it will actually calculate the total size of everything in that directory. So in my root file system, I have a total of 1.1 gigabyte apparently. And it's a little cut off because we don't, the GUI doesn't have dynamic sizing respond to font sizes everywhere yet. It is an area that we are slowly making progress on. So it does look a little awkward, but you could see that it was kind of calculating it like progressively, right? Like, so it sort of traverses the file system live when you open these things. And that works on a background thread, if I recall correctly. So it's just a background thread that traverses the file system and figures out how large everything is. And I think this is super neat. We should probably have some kind of delimiters here in this huge number because it's a bit hard to look at. But great feature in general, and big props to Tim for building that. Okay, something else that has nothing to do with that, but an image viewer. I know that Tim, the same person, also did this right and left navigation here. So you can navigate left and right with the keys on your keyboard to navigate through the files in a directory. And that was not working before, and now it is. So that is a sweet thing to have, because it's nice sometimes, you know, you open up your big meme stash and you want to just browse through. It's nice to be able to just tap left and right for that. All right, so I think those were the main GUI changes I wanted to look at. Some non-GUI changes, something that I find very exciting is that we now have the beginnings of POSIX shell support. So So far, we've had a sort of a bespoke custom shell language called Shell. And this month, Ali started building a POSIX compliant parser for Shell as an alternative parser. So if you start the parser by invoking it with the name sh, then it runs in POSIX mode instead, and it has a POSIX compliant parser. And as you can see here, then it no longer is able to run my login script, because the login script uses, well, I don't know if it does anything wrong, but yeah, I guess it's not POSIX syntax. It's our shell syntax, obviously, because I see the curlies here. So this is still in its infancy, but I think it's really, really awesome, because once we have a POSIX compliant mode for the shell, that means that we'll be able to run POSIX shell scripts, something that hasn't been possible before. You had to install bash or some other POSIX compatible shell if you wanted to run shell scripts. So this is, I think, very, very awesome. And I'm really grateful that Ali started working on that. So thank you, Ali. Final thing I wanted to mention is, I know that Niklas this month has been working on getting the system working on some other operating systems, or not getting the system working on other operating systems, but getting parts of the system working, specifically the Ladybird browser. So Niklas has been adding support for NetBSD, OpenBSD, and I think the last I saw, he had a PR in progress for Solaris support. So I think that's really cool as well, just bringing our software to other Unixes and making sure it works there as well. It's nice to see. So thank you, Niklas, for caring about that. Anyways, now we're going to visit Linus, who's going to talk about our browser stack.
So let's take a look at the JavaScript engine changes from the last month. There wasn't a whole lot. We did quite a bit of cleanup and refactoring, but we have a couple of fixes as well. So let me show you those. Let's call the JS REPL here. Or let's look at the file actually first. So we have a few new things in bytecode that started working, thanks to some work from Leon, who you might know as Handy Edioin. And first of all, that's async functions. I'm not sure if they used to work, but at least they were broken until recently, and now they work again. So we have a function bar that is async and returns a value, function foo that awaits the function call of bar, and then it logs the result. And let's try that out. So first, using the AST interpreter, so that would be JS and then bc-async await. That logs 42 as expected, and then using the -b flag, we can run it with the bytecode interpreter, which works the same way. And I can also show you the generated bytecode, which is the dump flag. And as you can see, there's a whole lot of that. Not going to go through it all, but if you're interested, you can look how this works. And he also made unwinding in try catch and try finally blocks work. So let's look at another example. So here we have a nested try catch. First we call a function that doesn't exist. We catch the exception. We try to call another function that doesn't exist. We have a finally block, so this one doesn't have a catch. We log finally first, and then we exit this catch block into another finally block, and then we log finally second. And then this error should bubble up because we haven't caught it, and it was thrown inside another catch block. So this should bubble up to the outside, and then exit the program. And let's see what happens. So first, using the old AST interpreter again, bytecode try catch, we see finally 1, we see finally 2, and we see the exception bar is not defined. So as predicted, and let's try that with bytecode, and that works the same way, which is great. So bytecode is slowly catching up with features, which is cool to see. And again, we can look at the generated bytecode instructions here using the dump flag. And again, not gonna go through all of it, but basically you can see we now have these enter unwind context and leave unwind context bytecode instructions. Also continue pending unwind. So there's quite a bit to discover there as well, if you're interested. And then one more fix, which was made by Ali. It's been a very old bug, actually. Like, this existed for more than 2 years, I want to say. And Ali made, as silly as it sounds, escaping in regexes, or regexes, if you will, work correctly. So let's see how that works. So we can make a regex like this. This is basically a string with 2 backslashes. We need to escape the backslash in the string. So JavaScript interprets this as 1 backslash and this as another. So this is the same basically. And an escape backslash in the regex is a literal backslash in the input string. And now if we look at the source of this, we get back the exact same string. So don't be confused. This is 2 backslashes. We just output it as 4. So you can copy and paste this and get the same string back. Also works using the literal syntax. So double backslash dot source. Yeah. So this is a fun little fix that took a very long time to get to. So thanks for that. And of course, we continued our journey of propagating out of memory situations in various more places, which I already mentioned last time. That's a continued effort and will probably go on for a few more months. But we're making a lot of progress on that as well. And then hopefully at one point we have the engine completely hardened against any out of memory situations and it won't crash anymore, which is pretty cool. That's it for JavaScript. So let's have a look at all the browser changes as well, and in the LibWeb engine. So same as in JavaScript, we have a bunch of ongoing conversions from infallible to fallible out of memory situations. So that also includes the strings and objects that are allocated on the JS heap and a couple of other things. It's not really showcaseable just yet. But I do want to mention the people who work on it. So that was Kenneth, Luke, Sam, Tim has been working on it. A bunch of people just chipping away. And it's really great work. It's progressing nicely and I'm looking forward to the end result. Let's look at some new features. So first of all, we have some updates to the shadow root JavaScript API by Carol. So you can see the test page here. Let me show you the source code. It's a simple div and then a script that gets the div from the DOM, says attach shadow with mode open, which means we can sort of retrieve the shadow root and then change it. And then we write some HTML to it and the result you can see here. So it inserts content into the page. But if we inspect this, using our dump tree utility here, we just go into the body and you can see this div here doesn't really have any expandable child nodes, which is because this content got inserted into a sort of hidden shadow DOM that is only attached to this div element but not part of the main DOM. And so we still need to update this tree to show those as well. But yeah, you can see it's nicely separated. So thanks to Carol for adding that. Next up is a very subtle change that you might have noticed already if you watched the last video. Now with scaling on the web page, the font sizes is scaled correctly. So last time we had an issue with the font size. And for example, the links will have longer underlines than the actual text. But Alexander went ahead and fixed that. So now the font rendering scales accordingly with the rest of the page. And it's just very satisfying to zoom in and out. So if you haven't tried this yet, definitely check out the zooming feature because it's just working great now. Really like it. So thanks for that. And Alexander also implemented a bunch of other stuff. For example, we have some new layout tests that sort of hopefully prevent regressions. So some behind the scenes work as well. Then next we have a change in the canvas, or rather addition. So MacU implemented this create pattern function. That's just taking an image and a direction, and then you can see it goes either into both directions or just X and Y axis. Rather simple. Then we have, you might have already noticed, this is a little bit lighter than the rest of the text here. It's sort of highlighting the main part, which is more obvious on a page like this, where we can just see the domain being highlighted here. And both the protocol and the subpage are a little bit lighter in color. You might already notice from some other browser as well. It's fairly common and hopefully helps to sort of identify the page that you're on a little easier. That was added by Cameron, and I think it was ported from the Ladybird browser, so the Qt application that we have outside of the OS here, which already has this as well. Then we have some changes to Checkbox default styling. So if you don't apply any CSS, obviously the browser needs to make up a default style for things like button and form elements, checkboxes as well. The old one just used to render, used to defer the painting to libgfx, so it would just paint a default checkbox that sort of looks like the rest of the system, which is okay, but looks a bit out of place in the browser because we stopped doing that for buttons as well quite a while ago. And more importantly, the reason why I did that change was because they didn't scale properly. And now that we have the zooming that I demoed earlier, that's fairly important. And so now this is just re-implemented using CSS. So it's just like a border around the element. And if it's checked, it has a background image. And that just works sort of at basically all scales. So yeah. What next? Luke implemented something that I cannot show easily because all the logging goes to a window that is off screen. But Luke implemented coarse preflight requests, which are fairly important for security. They sort of, I mean, you can read up all the details on MDN probably, but the short version is that we do for certain types of requests in fetch. We do a request before that, which is an HTTP option request, and it sort of checks with the server if that subsequent request and its headers and method would be okay, and we block that request otherwise. That's a part I skipped when first implementing fetch, and I'm very happy that Luke now went ahead and did that. Next up is form data. So we have a normal HTML form here. First name, last name, a few text fields, a few checkboxes, and the button. Let's look at the source. Right down here, so it's just like a regular form, bunch of inputs. And it has an onClick handler, which is this function here. And so we grab the form, we attach a callback to it on form data, and then we pass that form DOM element to a constructor called form data. And that allows us to very easily extract all the data, as it says, from that given form. So we don't really have to poke into the DOM manually and extract like the value attribute or whatever. We can just say get, and then this is the ID that you can see down here. So for and ID. And so this allows us to just get a bunch of values from the form. And even down here, the transport types, which is checkboxes here, and then loop through them and print them up. So let's just try that. Select a few and hit this button. And it said it fired a form data event. It grabbed a bunch of values from the form. And then it prints out all the checkboxes here. So it's very neat. It's an API that I honestly didn't even know before. So it's cool to learn about this. And that was added by Kenneth. So thank you very much for that. let's see what's next. We have this one. So this is a rather simple page. Again, let's look at the source code. Also, let me close this window. So all we have here is a section with some content and an Aria-Label. So this is continued work on Aria, so web accessibility basically. And this label is obviously hidden from the rendered content. So this is sort of metadata for example, a screen reader or any other sort of automated tool that could help you assist the page with the keyboard, for example. And if we look at the DOM tree, this is now actually exposed in the accessibility tab, where we have the accessibility tree as well. So we have 2 empty nodes here, and then a region, which is this section, and it has a name, which is a label, which is the one that we applied ourselves. So we now pass and sort of propagate this information to the tree. And it's not used for anything else yet, but it could be in the future. So this is very nice progress on Aria. This was done by Jonah, so thank you for that. And also MagDew ported this DOM inspector change to Ladybird, so that both browser applications have feature parity, which is nice. Next, we have some work by Ali on WebAssembly. I don't have a showcase now. I looked for one earlier but couldn't really find anything good. But what Ali implemented is the JS API for WebAssembly multi-value returns. So functions in WebAssembly could historically only return a single value, and now they can return multiple, like a tuple, like 2 integers, for example. And that is now in the core spec, and now we have it. So thank you, Ali, for that change. Then a rather interesting change under the hood in the JS console by Andrew. So we have now much improved console.log output for web objects. So for example, location property on the global object holds information about the page URL basically. And this used to just print, I think it was object location like this. Not very helpful. And now we actually print all the properties. So you could say location at href. And so you can see this is included in the full output now, which helps a lot with debugging. So thank you, Andrew, for making that change. And then lastly, a very small but effective change that Andreas did to the error pages. So if we receive a server error, so for example, a 400 or 500 or 5xx error code, we would previously show a browser-provided error page. So a little warning triangle and saying the page failed to load. Not very helpful, especially if the page provides some content. So many pages will just say, like, we have a generic error page, and then they will maybe link to support or something like that. And that we will just ignore. And now it's loaded if there's content on the page. So that's super helpful. Don't have a demo right now because it's just for malfunctioning pages, but you might see it one day. That's all. Back to Andreas.
I think that's everything we had to show you today. So thank you so much for checking in and staying up to date with the project. If you want to come chat with us, we have a Discord server. It's linked in the video description below. You can also come chat with me when I stream, which I do on Fridays, here on YouTube at 4 p.m. Swedish time. And if you would like to support the SerenityOS developers financially, there are donation options for individual developers in the video description below as well. I personally work on this full-time since May of 2021, and it's amazing to be able to continue to do so, and I'm super grateful for all the support. And yeah, that's it. So thanks for stopping by, and see you all next time. Bye.